right, everyone, settle in for some college football talk on this fine Tuesday. It's noon here in the Eastern Time Zone. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, coming your way as we do each and every day with discussion, debate, and analysis. So we do our best to bring on the very best bloggers, broadcasters, writers in the industry. We got Pigskin Pete to talk about that team. They're the champs. They still look like the champs, and until somebody knocks them off, and this may be the week. This may be the toughest test of the season, of course, with Jimbo Fisher coming to town with his Aggies. And it was a good one last year, but of course that was at Kyle Field. Pigskin Pete, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am doing just fine. So before we get to the football, certainly you are in the path. You are in the path of Dorian. Just give us an idea of what you're looking at right now, what you're hearing, what you're seeing, and based on your experience of going through this all the time, what you do to prepare.
Yeah, pretty much it's just a big pain in the you know what, but we are still in the cone of uncertainty, as they would say, where it's still possible it could make a direct landfall where I live. I live just outside of Charleston, South Carolina, and but it looks like it's most likely going to get very close to the coast and then skirt up to either go out to sea or maybe hit North Carolina. But either way, we're going to get bad weather, hurricane force winds, probably some down trees. Hopefully, we don't lose power. If we do, it could be out for a couple of days. So I'm just really hoping and praying for the best, not only for us here in Charleston, but throughout the entire Carolinas and Georgia as well, that everybody can get out without any major loss of property or certainly not any loss of life.
Yeah, so for everyone out there, certainly thoughts and prayers going that direction. And then once it hits, and there's certainly going to be certain areas that are going to be hit worse than others, and it's going to be a crucial situation for some people in the aftermath. So do all you can in regards to donations. Obviously, I'm familiar with a lot of programs that are put together to get people down there to help out, depending on the damage and where it is, and so forth and so on. All right, Pixie and Pete, let's talk some Clemson football. Man, what is that? Is that a fat head behind you?
Yes, it is.
That is the fat head for Clemson. Very nice, very nice. You're prepared for us, and you got it perfectly positioned with the paw right over the shoulder. I like it.
There you go. I aim to please, Mark. You already know that.
you're outclassing me right now. We were just talking about YouTube production of sorts before we jumped on, and yes, the lighting, the camera angles, and so forth will need some serious work here at Mark Rogers TV, but we will address that one thing at a time, folks. All right. Man, I don't know that we can take a whole lot from 52-14 against Georgia Tech. They were right on the betting line pretty much at minus 37. Of course, they took care of business. It was never in doubt, even before they stepped on the field, but certainly once they got out there. But the things that people take away generally are going to be not so much that Trevor Lawrence had this awful game and what's wrong with him. I think reasonable people aren't going to go in that direction. But he let a few passes get away, 2 picks. 13 of 23 shows that either guys are dropping the ball, he was under duress, those are concerns, or he was just missing his target. So I got to tell you, I saw maybe 10 or 15 plays of the game. ACC Network, I don't have it. I was focusing on more competitive games as well. Your thoughts about Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah, he had an off day, I guess you would say. I mean, especially when the standard for him is so high and the expectations for him are so high, then there's a microscope on him. And if you have an off day as a quarterback and you're Trevor Lawrence, it's going to get scrutinized, and that's fine. I'm not worried about Trevor Lawrence one single bit, though, to be honest with you. I mean, the guy didn't forget how to play football from the end of the national championship game in January. He'll be fine. And as a matter of fact, I actually believe that may be the best thing that could have happened to him, considering who they're playing this week. And so it may wake him up a little bit, shake the cobwebs off, and get him laser focused for this game. The rest of the team, I was very happy with the rest of the team. What I was really looking for in this game, because we knew that they were going to blow Georgia Tech out no matter how they played, but was looking at some of these young guys, mainly on defense, the defensive line, KJ Henry, Xavier Thomas, who's the other one? Jordan Williams. And then, of course, some of these guys at linebacker, the guy that everyone's talking about is going to have a huge year this year, played really well, and that's Skalski. So I was happy what I saw with that, and I was very happy with the run game. Obviously, Etienne had himself a big, big day. No surprise there. But his backup, Lynn J. Dixon, who was a true freshman last year, and he played limited downs last year and played well when he played, but he's now the number 2 guy. He's going to get a lot of snaps this year, and he did not disappoint. He had himself a big day as well. So the offense just looks great, man. The defense, I think, is going to get better as the season goes on. But the offense right now, I mean, I just don't know if there's as talented an offense anywhere in the country than what Clemson has right now.
Yeah, I don't think so. I really don't think so. When you take it all into consideration, Oklahoma has what they have, but there's no comparison, I don't think, between Jalen Hurts. Very fine player. Very fine player. Might be better than I thought, but we'll see against tougher defenses. But certainly Trevor Lawrence can spin it, unlike just about anybody out there. There's a couple around that might be in his class. But yeah, the off the field ramifications, meaning the Heisman Trophy ramifications of the Lawrence performance versus Travis Etienne, might be the biggest storyline there, because Travis Etienne, obviously there's a situation where he's going to be given a lot of respect based on the numbers he posted last year, and he's kind of a fringe guy that is being talked about, or was in the off season. But it's a Trevor Lawrence team, and if he turns in too many of those kind of games, even if they keep winning, I don't know that that's going to be an issue on the field, but may take the spotlight off him. And if the Etienne just has eye-popping numbers, especially in the big games coming up, Syracuse, Texas A&M, then maybe he gets himself in that running.
Yeah, it's going to be I think it's going to be tough for Trevor to win the Heisman this year. Not because he's not capable of doing it, but like you just said, there's so many stars on Clemson's team to sort of take the shine away. And not to mention that, forget about Clemson. Some of these other players, Jonathan Taylor is going to get 25 touches a game in the Big Ten. And we see what he does. He's got over 4,000 yards in his first 2 seasons. So he's basically the bell cow on that team. He's not really splitting a lot of carries with somebody like Lynn J. Dixon for Clemson. And then you got somebody like Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma. This guy might run for 1,000 yards and pass for 5,000 against those Big 12 defenses. So it's not necessarily, we all know this by now, right? I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's not necessarily the best player in college football. It's really the player with the best stats that wins it.
Yeah, I will put a little condition on that. It's the player with whatever catches everyone's eye, or at least the majority of voters, I think, between 3 things. If the stats are just overwhelming, Jonathan Taylor comes out, even if Wisconsin goes 8-4, and it may become a kind of career award. So Ron Dane, his last season at Wisconsin, he'd been racking up these 1,800-yard seasons as well. His last year wasn't anything outstanding. It was outstanding, but not compared to what he had already done. And they basically, it was kind of like, here's your career achievement award. And that may turn out to be the case with Jonathan Taylor. But yeah, he's going to rack up ridiculous stats. So sometimes the stats are so overwhelming. I think the winning obviously plays into it as well. So there's going to be an advantage of a Lawrence over a Jonathan Taylor if Wisconsin's what we think they are, an 8-win team. And then number 3, if you have those signature moments, you do something crazy, you make some ridiculous run or throw in the final seconds of a game that really stands out in people's minds, like, wow, that was the play of the season. I think there's some combination, and it's different every year. The formula is different to a certain extent every year, but we'll see how it plays out. But Travis Etienne with 205 in the books already.
Yeah, you may see a similar problem for Trevor Lawrence that you saw for Tua last year as far as the Heisman goes, is that based on their schedule, outside of maybe this Texas A&M game, he's not going to play a lot in the second half of these games this year, I don't think. And so, of course, people like Jalen Hurts and some of these other players that play full games, they'll have an advantage at the end of the year.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, bringing on Pigskin Pete to talk some Clemson football as the Tigers prepare for Texas A&M on Saturday afternoon. Actually, Saturday afternoon game should be a really good one, obviously, and probably the toughest test, I would think. It's pretty clear cut for me of the season here in 2019. Want to remind you that whether it's here or whether it's over at Pigskin Pete's channel, I've got a promotion with betnow.eu, so you can go either way on that in regards to jumping on there, getting 100% added to your account. Pretty good deal. Throw in $100, get $100. You're in front of the sticks. You got some free money to play with. Went 16 against the spread last week, so pretty decent at 59%. That'll make you a little bit of money. Man, I had some crushing losses there at the end of the game, like that Northwestern Stanford situation killed me. So the bad beats got me last week in serious fashion, and I know as prognosticators, and I'll ask you your take on this. We tend to remember obviously the gut wrenching ones that go against us in the last 13 seconds of the game, but they should even out by the end of the year. But man, between Auburn not kicking a field goal, which would have put me in good shape at 3.5, but going for the touchdown, going for broke and getting it, between Northwestern only being down 3 with like 20 seconds left in the game, I'm getting 6.5. Hunter Johnson gets blindsided, and the Northwestern offensive lineman can't just fall on the ball, and Stanford's got to score a touchdown with like 12 seconds left in the game. And there was a third one out there somewhere that was crazy. We expect close games, but when stuff like that happens, it just obviously 2 or 3 days later still getting to me. So how are the predictions going?
I'm doing great, actually. As far as the Bet Now contest goes, I'm 5-3 through the first 2 weeks.
Very nice.
And so I guess that's about 60%. And then on a personal level, not the Bet Now thing, but my personal money, I had a parlay bet on Houston to cover against Oklahoma, and they did. And I had the over at 79.5. And of course, I was sweating the second to last play of the game. Oklahoma scored a touchdown to make it go to 80. So I won that parlay by 0.5 point on the over there. So I was extremely happy about that.
Woo! Yeah, that's skating by. Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, I really need to get on the sticks when it comes to the I saw those wins coming in on Saturday. So I pick all the top 25 games. I just pick every top 25 game straight up and against the spread. Then I'll throw in like a North Carolina, South Carolina because it's relevant, interesting, etc. So I'll throw in some of those as well and take my shot. And I know that that's not really helping the percentage, but that's just what I've done forever. But yeah, I need to get in going on the competition because I pretty much just forgot. So too much going on here, Pigskin Pete. I tell you, just too much going on to keep track of. So Texas A&M, man, your thoughts about what happened last year and how much of it relates to what could happen Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, I really think you could take pretty much everything that happened last year and throw it right out the window. I mean, there's going to be some things you can take away from last year. Number one would be Kellen Mond, right? But if you just look at these are two different teams completely than they were last year. There's a lot of big factors that play into this. First of all, the game is in Clemson. That's a 7-point favorite right off the bat, as far as I'm concerned. And I think Vegas agrees with me. And I was actually surprised to see the line as high as it was, that Clemson's favored by like 17 points. And I think it might have started at like 19. It's moving down. So at least 7 of those points are because they're at home, which means that most likely the prognosticators in Vegas think that Clemson's at least a 10-point better team than Texas A&M on a neutral field. But this game was in A&M last year. It was early in the season, week 2. We had Kelly Bryant was the starter, and we also had very young Trevor Lawrence, who had very, very little to no experience in college football and going into that environment. And at that point, yes, Kelly Bryant was the starter, but there was really a quarterback competition going on, being played out live in front of us on the field. And so they sort of swapped back and forth during that game. And so the difference this year is with Clemson anyway, is you don't have a young Trevor Lawrence. You have an experienced Trevor Lawrence who's 10 times better than he was in week 2 of last season. These younger receivers are grown up and better. Our running game, I think, is going to be better. We had ETN last year, but I think he only ran the ball 6 or 7 times in the game last year against A&M, which is ridiculous. He'll get a lot more carries than that this time. And he also has a very dynamic backup in Lynn-J Dixon. A lot of people are talking about how, Clemson's defensive line is nowhere close to what it was last year. Well, that's probably true, except for the fact that the secondary is a lot better this year, more experienced than it was last year for Clemson. And I don't really think there's that much of a drop-off on the defensive line, certainly not in talent. So Texas A&M, I know, lost a lot of players on defense as well. So, I think that no matter who Clemson plays this year, including Alabama, if it's in the playoffs, or Georgia in the playoffs, or whoever, and Texas A&M this week, There's not a single team in America that's going to hold Clemson's offense to under 35 points. So the question is, can A&M score 35 points to keep up with Clemson? And I don't think they can. I think it'll be, even if they score, 27, I'd be very impressed with that. But I don't think that they can keep up with Clemson for 4 quarters scoring wise.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. This is what we do each and every day. So lock it in for the college football season. We bring on the best bloggers, broadcasters, writers in the industry, guys that know what they're talking about, love their teams, love their conference, whatever it is, and love to talk college football and know what they're talking about. Otherwise, they don't get invited back. So Pigskin Pete, guy knows what he's talking about. He's had the invitation several times. Let's look around the ACC. The ACC taking a beating, and we'll get back into Texas A&M and Clemson, but this comes to mind in regards to what happened last week with North Carolina, with a decent showing against South Carolina, and maybe Mac Brown knows what he's doing, and maybe some Florida State fans who were all over me when I ranked Mac Brown in my ACC coaches rankings ahead of Willie Taggart will maybe notice a few things of what's happening on the field. But, Florida State takes the downer at home after an 18-point lead. They were, to me, a wild card team coming into the season. Like, okay, well, the talent's top 5 to 15 in the nation. If you look at the recruiting rankings, what's it going to be? Because it was a mess last year, and it's kind of still a mess, although Boise State's good, but they shouldn't lose to Boise State at home. Your thoughts about ACC play? Syracuse is coming up in a couple of weeks. They took care of business, obviously, against an undermanned team. Miami loses to Florida in a rock fight, but show that they can play in that league. So it's obviously wide open on the other side. Virginia gets a big win against Pitt that kind of goes under the radar with some of the big national games. But Virginia, a team that they lost to last year that basically knocked them out of first place in the Coastal. Pitt, they get the win. They dominate in the second half.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with some teams in the ACC, and I'm very disappointed in some other ones. Obviously, Florida State is a complete dumpster fire right now. This is the 3rd year in a row now, at least maybe the 4th, that their offensive line has just been atrocious. They can't block anybody. So Florida State, just forget about them. I don't know what's going to happen with Willie Taggart, but I'd be surprised if they make a bowl game this year again for the 2nd year in a row. Miami actually, yes, they lost to Florida, but let's not forget that Florida was ranked number 8 preseason, and Miami was not ranked. And Miami came in with a redshirt freshman, but a first-time starting quarterback in Jaron Williams. And the offensive line play was pretty bad for Miami as well. I actually think Miami is going to get better because I think the offensive line play is going to get better. They're young too, and the quarterback position is going to get better. Miami's defense is really good. So I actually have a higher upside for Miami this year than most people do. Okay. I'm really impressed with Virginia. Obviously, that's a lot of people's preseason favorite to win the Coastal. And right now they look like the best team in the Coastal, quite frankly. Virginia Tech, massively disappointed in Virginia Tech. They just looked absolutely awful against Boston College. Now, I'll give Boston College credit. I watched that game and they played really well. But I don't know how much of that was Boston College playing great or how much of that was Virginia Tech's offense just being awful like it's been for the past few years. Outside of that, yeah, you mentioned the North Carolina beating South Carolina. I do think that North Carolina is a much improved team under Mac Brown than they were last year. Obviously, they can't get much worse. They only won, 2 games last year? So, North Carolina is going to be a good team, but not great. So really, I still think you have the 3 leading horses to put all your marbles in one basket as far as the ACC goes. Obviously, Clemson, Miami's promising, and then, of course, Virginia. Now, last night, Louisville impressed me as well. But, the problem with Louisville is they're in Clemson's division. So, they don't, if they were in the Coastal, I might say they had a chance to compete with Virginia and Miami, but they don't have a chance to compete with Clemson. So that's the way I see the state of the ACC right now as of this first week.
Yeah, so it's been about 3 seasons since Florida State was able to go toe-to-toe with Clemson. I know they played some decent games against them up until last year, 59-10. But, man, if this stays this way for too much longer, I don't know the way the ACC is going to address that. I bring on guys that talk Syracuse football, Boston College, on down the line, and it's a It's not a great division because aside from Clemson, there's nobody who's really that good, but there's nobody bad. If Louisville jumps up and plays some decent football this
Right.
year, there's a lot of like really good, like 7-5 teams that'll go to bowl games and represent the conference pretty well. But man,
Right.
if they go to the Coastal, you throw Wake in the Coastal the last few years, they got a chance. Boston
Yeah.
College, you throw them in. Syracuse, obviously, they might have won the division. They probably would have won the division last year.
Yeah.
And it's just a lockdown situation in one division, and then there's like just a mess in the other division where there's not even like a Wisconsin in the other division to say, oh well, they're pretty good. They're like top 20 good, and it'll be interesting. I think it's fun, but I don't have to be a fan of one of those teams that has no chance, and then can look at the other division and say, man, I wish we were over there.
Yeah. And I've been catching hell on Twitter. Actually, not catching hell. I've been giving hell, and it's been a lot of fun the past 4 or 5 days. Ever since Saturday, when we had 3 SEC schools lose to non-Power 5 schools, and quite frankly, the SEC East looks really bad outside of Georgia. Now, obviously, Florida's not terrible, right? But they did barely get past Miami in that Week 0 game, and then South Carolina loses to North Carolina. Missouri loses to Wyoming. Who else am I missing here?
Missouri lost Tennessee.
Yeah, Missouri. Tennessee lost to Georgia
Tennessee.
State, which was probably the worst loss in that program's history. I think Kentucky won pretty handily, but of course they were playing a bad team, and Vanderbilt, of course, got handled by Georgia, but that was to be expected. But yeah, outside of Georgia and maybe Florida, at this point, I really don't know, who's very good in the East right now in the SEC.
I don't either, because Kentucky lost a lot. We'll have to see them play a decent team. Nobody's expecting them to be nearly as good as 10 wins. South Carolina, we saw what they did against North Carolina, and I think the Tar Heels, like you said, are much improved, but nothing close to what South Carolina should win as a 12-point favorite. And then Missouri, a lot of people liked Missouri coming into the season, and they go to a Mountain West team, and actually they lose by a touchdown, and based on the highlights I saw and the score stats, it wasn't as close as the final score indicated.
I will say, I predicted that, and I even bet on for my bet now picks. I picked Wyoming in that game. They were like 17-point underdogs, and I said, look, never schedule, if you're a Power 5 team, never schedule a true road game against a non-Power 5 team week 1. It almost never works out good. Look at what happened with Arizona going to Hawaii and losing.
Purdue.
Even if they don't lose the game, they don't ever cover the spread. So that's almost a shoe-in bet every year. So I won that bet. But I didn't see, Missouri losing that game. But I watched that game, and man, their defense looks awful. Missouri's does.
Yeah, Purdue, the same thing. They go out to Nevada. They have a 17-point lead. They blow it. They lose. They're an 11-point favorite. Don't get it done. Don't even win the game. We got Navy Thomas on the line with a comment concerning my top 25. So I invite anybody who's watching right now to check out my top 25. So I label it the top 25 that actually makes sense, because it's just based on the results. If you understand and you listen to the intro, listen to the logic, maybe you can catch on. It's not a perfect top 25, but there are no predetermined assumptions made. It's just based on what happened in week 1. So you're going to see some odd choices, Pigskin Pete, if you check out my top 25. But if you follow the logic, that's what it is. And the week-by-week progression will correct the top 25. As it's Wyoming's ranked right now. They're ranked. Yeah. They had one of the 25 best wins in the country.
I understand the way you do that, and I actually agree with the way you do it. I think it's more logical than what the AP does or anybody else. But asking your viewers to be logical is a very tall task.
Absolutely. So I was going to ask you this question. You kind of dove into it a little bit when you talked about Twitter and some of the grief you take on Twitter. You must have been all over the SEC, but what kind of fun stuff do you get? Well, we've been through an off season and now 1 week into the season, 10 days into a season, in regards to what really gets to you in regards to what you hear from your viewers.
Well, I mean, I was actually a little bit more disappointed in some of the Clemson fans' reaction about what happened with Georgia Tech than the other people. And that was, a lot of these Clemson fans, I guess this happens when you start winning a lot, is you start feeling this sort of entitlement, and they're upset with the way Clemson played. And they say, well, if we play against like that against Texas A&M next week, we're going to lose. And I say, look, first of all, it was 52-14. I don't care if you were playing against Georgia Tech or a directional school somewhere in the middle of nowhere. You still won by a big margin and blew the team out. And you got these other teams out here losing to non-Power 5 teams, not only, just barely getting by them. And so that really gets under my skin, is when the fans sort of throw the team under the bus. And here's the other thing I say to people. They say, well, they may lose to Texas A&M if they play that way. I say, you know what? Clemson's not unbeatable. If Clemson loses to Texas A&M, maybe it's just because they got beat by a really good team. I mean, they're not invincible. They're going to lose a game at some point. The question is when. It could be this week. It could be against Syracuse. It could be against Louisville. Or it could be in the ACC title game, or it could be in the first round of the playoffs, on and on and on. The fact of the matter is Clemson is not unbeatable. So stop thinking that.
They're not unbeatable. It doesn't seem that way to a lot of people, and I get it. I understand they won 16 consecutive, and the showing against Alabama was what it was. But nobody's unbeatable. Jesse Sullivan's looking at the Georgia Tech game, wondering what your thoughts are about what was shown in that game, if really Clemson kept it under wraps, waiting for Texas A&M, and your thoughts about the game planning.
Yeah, I don't know if I buy into that. I've heard that theory that they sort of kept it vanilla and to not show their cards. I think Clemson is who they are. And they are a team that's very balanced. They run the ball about 50% of the time. They throw the ball about 50% of the time. And of course, they use their elite running backs to set up the big, the play action pass. I mean, they are who they are. They did that against Georgia Tech. They just made some bad plays on offense. They're going to do that against Texas A&M. And listen, Jimbo Fisher there's no other coach in the country that is more familiar with Dabo Swinney and his system than Jimbo Fisher. So I don't think there's any big surprise. You're not going to see Clemson do anything different this week than you did last week or the year before that or the year before that. They are who they are. And there is a little bit of a surprise factor as far as A&M goes. I think that Jimbo Fisher knows that he's probably, doesn't have quite the talent to compete with Clemson. And he may have to do some sort of trick plays here or there, maybe even a fake field goal or fake punt or an onside kick like Nick Saban did in the national championship that one year when they were losing and they ended up winning. So something along those lines where Jimbo might try to throw Clemson off kilter a little bit.
Okay, folks, you're watching Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So if you don't see Pigskin Pete on a normal basis, definitely jump over to his channel, give him a subscription there. You will not be disappointed. Some of Pigskin Pete's people, if you're jumping on here to hear him and you like what you see here, certainly subscribe, like, comment, do all those good things and help us build the channel. All right, Kellen Mond played out of his mind in the second half, in particular at Kyle Field. So that might have been a little bit of magic that they caught. That he's a good quarterback. He's not a very consistent quarterback, at least not last year. If you look at the game lines, I recall an Auburn game in which he didn't play particularly well, but Travion Williams was playing out of his mind. They were scoring points. They had a 10-point lead against Auburn. He throws a horrible pick. They're icing the game going into the red zone to go up 17 at Auburn with like 6 minutes left in the game. And of course, Pigskin Pete, this stands out because, this was another bad beat, where I've got Texas A&M with like 4 points or whatever the deal is. And they blow a 10-point lead in the last 5 minutes because he throws a horrible pick. Auburn scores 2 touchdowns. They win the game. And if you look at the game lines again, he had a couple clunkers in there. And that was really his best. And it's kind of ironic, maybe against the best defense he played, he caught a little bit of magic in that second half. Now, a lot of that had to do with the wide receiver core is exceptional, like a top 5 wide receiver core and will be this year. Not quite as good as Clemson, but they are really, really good. So it's legit, but that's about his peak. That's his ceiling, what we saw in the second half last year.
Yeah, I really like Kellen Mond, but like you said, he is inconsistent. His biggest strength is his ability to extend plays, and that's really what kept Texas A&M in the game last year. And if they're going to stay in this year, he's going to have to do the same thing. But Texas A&M, they have the horses to compete. Out of any other team that Clemson plays this year, they match up well on the offensive and defensive line as far as size. They match up on the outside. They're similar to Clemson's wide receivers. They got some big guys that can go up and get the ball. So, I mean, the difference here is, Kellen Mond's not even a tenth of the passer that Trevor Lawrence is, but he might not have to be. Historically, Clemson does struggle, sort of like Alabama, over history over the past 4 or 5 years with mobile quarterbacks. And we've had a couple of close games against Lamar Jackson. Trying to think of who else that's given us trouble. Oh, the kid from Syracuse, Dungy. He was a mobile quarterback. We obviously had trouble with him a couple of times. So the Achilles heel is we do much better with the pocket passers than we do with the mobile guys. So if he's able to extend some plays and maybe get a couple of big plays down the field, then that is really what's going to keep A&M in the game in the fourth quarter.
Got Nice Guy TV. DeAndre's on the line giving us a contribution. We appreciate that. I will remind everyone that the Super Chat is on if you want to help us build the channel. Appreciate the contributions. So DeAndre wanted Wake Forest in my top 25. They beat Utah State by 3 points at home. So I gave them a look. I lined up all the 1-0 teams. I gave them a look. We only rewarded one team that lost last week. You'll have to check out the top 25, but it's a pretty easy guess as to what team performed extremely well but still lost the game against a quality opponent. But yeah, Wake didn't quite get there in the top 25. You brought up Jimbo recently, and obviously that was the ACC 5 years ago. It was Florida State, Clemson. You guys were moving in that direction, knocking off teams like Ohio State and LSU in bowl games, but would get the beat down from Florida State in the fall and would still be an extremely good top 10 team. And then you saw that transition kick in, and you guys finally did it. And Florida State was still really good the first couple of times you beat them down, but still really good games. Still won an Orange Bowl there in 2016, and then obviously they've gone into the abyss with Willie. But any from a Clemson perspective, whether that's you personally or what you hear from your fans and viewers, any different thoughts about Jimbo than just Team X coming to town with whatever coach?
No. I mean, first of all, I've been on record as saying that I think that Jimbo Fisher is at least one of the top 5 coaches in America. Listen, he's one of the very few that are left coaching right now that have a national championship ring. His record speaks for itself. He's an elite recruiter. He's an elite developer of quarterbacks. He's an elite X's and O's guy. Obviously, he's at a place that has the financial resources to give him everything that he needs. As far as personally, I think that Jimbo Fisher is a scumbag, and he's a little bit of a car salesman. I don't believe anything that comes out of his mouth. And so, but that doesn't matter. My personal feelings about Jimbo Fisher, people will say, well, that's because you hate him because you're a Clemson fan. No, I didn't used to hate him. There's some things that happened here in the past few years that exposed my hate for him, really. But listen, at the end of the day, none of that matters. I'm sure Texas A&M fans are extremely happy to have him. And if I were them, I would be too, because he'll win football games. But outside of those personal feelings I have for him, I think he's a great coach, and he's going to do his thing. I expect Texas A&M will be a top 5 team annually here within the next couple of years.
And, Pigskin, he goes to a program, obviously, in a division where he's made it tough on himself. But obviously, they handed him the big paycheck and the big contract, and he's being paid. Right. So look at Mark Richt at Georgia. If Mark Richt is paid like a top 25 coach, then I would expect his results would have been fine. But when Mark Richt was fired, people asked me, is that fair? And I said, Mark Richt is doing a fine job. He's finishing in the top 10 to 15 every year. I think he finished in the top 10 more than he didn't finish in the top 10. His teams are very competitive. They're not winning championships. He's paid like a top 3 or 4 salary, kind of like Harbaugh. We talked about him the other day.
Yes.
If you just look at numbers and look at the rest of the nation, it's a good job that they're doing. But they're being paid like championship level coaches, therefore not good enough by. So Jimbo Fisher has placed himself in that situation against the King of the Hill. I know Dabo's taken that over to a certain extent, but King of the Hill overall in Nick Saban, not to mention LSU and Auburn and so forth. So, man, he goes to any other division in college football outside of Clemson in that roadblock. You got to feel very confident, but it's going to be fascinating whether he can. I know he's going to upgrade upgrade the program. He already has, but to do it to that extent and go toe to toe with Nick Saban for however long he's going to stay in Tuscaloosa is going to be fascinating.
And that's the key. Exactly how long will Saban stay in Tuscaloosa? If it's another 5 years, that's bad news for Jimbo Fisher. If it's only another 2 years, that's great news for Jimbo Fisher. But you could see it, an outlying year where Texas A&M is good enough to where they might, have just a great year and beat out Alabama in that division. But listen, 4 out of 5 years, Alabama's going to win that battle every time. So yeah, it really depends on how long Saban stays there. And I think as long as Saban stays there, it really depends on how many more championships he wins, right? If he goes to the playoffs again this year, or misses the playoffs, or goes to the playoffs and gets beat badly like he did last year, and that happens a couple more times, he may just get out of Dodge, right? Because he's not getting any younger. If he continues to play at a high level and win a couple more titles, he'll stay there maybe for longer. That's my personal opinion.
All right, folks, play nice in the sandbox. So the deal is here that trash talking is obviously allowed. We love it. Trash talk, don't get personal. People usually getting personal with each other in the live chat room there. Now they're taking shots at and take all the shots you want at me. Again, leave other things out of it and against Pixie and Pete. So somebody had to. This hardly ever happens. Might happen like twice a year that I have to say, bye out of the chat. Unfortunately, stick to college football, and we can have a great debate, regardless of what trash you throw in. We both, I think I can speak for Pixie and Pete here. Doesn't mind anything.
Yeah, no, they can throw all the trash they want at me, but a lot of times these cowards, I do a call-in show every week. These cowards don't have the cojones to call in my show and debate me because they'll lose. So they just say terrible things about me in the chat. That's the way they do things.
Yeah, and I don't even mind the terrible things in the chat if you want to say I'm a no-talent loser or whatever you want to say. But when it's, we know what the line is. The line is, race and politics and religion and those things. That has no place. So, Pigskin, yeah, where are we going from here, man? What do you have available on your channel at this point?
Well, I do have a new venture. I still have the YouTube channel. YouTube channel is going strong, having a lot of fun on there. Did just launch the website howardsrock.net, which is a partnership website with fanpride.zone. And what that is a subscription-based website where you get all sorts of fun, exclusive Clemson content videos. I do collaborations with a bunch of other video makers. We have articles up there that are posted weekly. And there's all sorts of fun interactive things you can do on the website with each other. We have NFL pick'em leagues and survivor pools that are all free, to play if you're a member. And of course, you win big prize packs. And we're just developing the website week by week, making it better and better. You can create a profile, and it's sort of like a mixture between like a Rivals it meets Facebook, where you can interact with other members of the website as well as with me and play against me in leagues and stuff and get a lot of exclusive video and written content. It's really a lot of fun. So everybody go check that out, especially if you're a Clemson fan. Go to howardsrock.net and check it out. But you don't have to be a Clemson fan to go in there and have fun with other college football fans. So that's what I have going on right now. That's my two biggest things of focus is my YouTube channel, keeping it going strong, and creating some great content for howardsrock.net and fanpride.zone. That
is very cool. I will have to give that a look. We'll have to give that a look. I want to remind everyone that if you got the notification, 1 o'clock Eastern time, we've got Matt Lowry coming on from SB Nation's Conquest Chronicles to talk about another program, another coach in trouble, Clay Helton, USC. They did get the W, but just barely against Fresno State. And, of course, JT Daniels done for the season. So we will be back here live. So just keep it on the front page of the channel, and we can lock in on some USC Stanford this week and take your calls as well. All right. Any other games jump out to you this week, Pigskin Pete?
Obviously, Texas and LSU. I'm really looking forward to seeing that one. Outside of that, what was the other one? I don't know why I'm looking forward to this game, but I am a BYU and Tennessee. And I guess the reason is I just want to see, is Tennessee really as bad as they were last week, or is that sort of a fluke anomaly thing? But listen, Tennessee's favored in Vegas in that. I might get off this video right now and go pick BYU against the spread as an underdog. So I don't know. We'll see. Outside of that, no, there's a lot of pretty uninteresting games this week. There's a lot of cupcake games. I'm sure I'm missing one or two interesting ones. Ohio State and Cincinnati is another one that I like to see, just because I want to see, how Justin Fields looks again after his good performance last week.
So you saw the same thing I saw when I looked at the week 2 schedule.
Yeah.
LSU Texas, I rated as the best non-conference game for a number of reasons. The best non-conference game of the season, and of course Clemson, Texas A&M. Then it just drops off the cliff.
Yeah.
And this is what I would correct about college football. So we've got the NFL taking over Thursday nights, and especially this week 1, I think it's Green Bay, Chicago, and everybody's going to be locked into that game. I understand college football staying away from that to a certain extent, but somebody could play. Nobody's playing on Thursday night. There is not a college football game on Thursday night. I would settle in on that 10 o'clock window and think, okay, this Bears-Packers game turns into a bad game or people lose interest or whatever, or we'll get second half viewers. I'm throwing out Boise State or Air Force or somebody to play some football, maybe out of the Pac-12 at 10 or 10:30 at night Eastern time. That's what I'm doing. But this is the problem when everybody schedules their own games and there's not a committee to look at the big picture. Then if you look at Friday night, it's awful. I will watch almost anybody play college football, but I can't watch the best game being like Boise State and Marshall. Like, that's the best game. Like, I can't. You got to grab somebody decent, and I don't expect the best games to be on Thursday and Friday night, but I expect a lot of like NC State, Wake Forest kind of games. Pick out a mid-tier ACC game or something out of the American Conference, like a Memphis-Houston kind of game, and give it to us. There's nobody playing on Friday night that there's any interest level at all. Virginia's playing William and Mary and those kind of games. So I don't know why that's awful for college football. There should be Friday night games a couple that are decent. We had Cincinnati, UCLA last week, those kind of games.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And also the Thursday night thing, they could have put a decent matchup on Thursday night. And, there may be some crossover between NFL and college fans, but for the most part, college football has its own audience. So they're not really competing with the NFL, in my opinion. They might lose a few viewers, but not a lot. And some people may flip back and forth and watch both. I know I'd be in that boat. So I agree with you. And the Friday night games, it should be one game every Friday night, and it should be a standalone game, and give some of these teams a chance to be watched nationally. But don't make them bad teams. I mean, make them at least middle of the road in their conference type of matchups.
Yeah, so it's a great point on Thursday night. So I don't know what that gauge is right there, because I have all sorts of people comment to me, and you obviously do as well, based on your take right there, that write in me all the time when people start asking NFL questions or I make any comment about the NFL. Man, I'll just get hit with comments. I hate the NFL. Don't care about the NFL. Don't say anything about the NFL. Then obviously some people just love football. I love football. Love the NFL. Love watching the NFL. And so there's some crossover. I don't know what that is. It would be fascinating to know what the overlap is. I'm sure there's been research done on it, but how many times do we watch a nationally televised NFL game? Most of them are really good, but how many of them are, 31-10 midway through the third quarter? And you're like, man, I would love to be able to check out, a mid-level ACC game, or like you say, spotlight the Mountain West or the American Conference and do that. Then on Friday night, there's absolutely nothing. See, that's what my scheduling committee would take care of, Pigskin Pete, is those kind of just misses in the schedule.
Yes, see, I'm a guy. I do love the NFL. Always have. I follow it very closely. Obviously, my entire YouTube channel is based completely around college football. I've sort of tried to dip my toes in and do some NFL videos here and there, but I found out very quickly that the people subscribe to me and that watch my videos don't care about the NFL at all. So there's no reason for me to waste my time even trying to talk about it, like you just said. So I think the majority of the college football fans in the country don't care about the NFL. Of course, there's some people like me that like both, but yeah, I agree.
All right, good stuff with Pigskin Pete, and I tell you, if I had any more time, which I don't, well, there'd be a lot of stuff that I would do for my channel. I would really work on that. But man, if I had carte blanche, this is what I'm doing full time. Plus, I brought on a few people. I'd start an NFL channel, but I just can't do it right by any stretch. But I love the NFL and would have takes on the NFL, no doubt. All right, Clemson, Texas A&M. Any final thoughts on this one?
I'll just give you a final score prediction so that I can be wrong about it. And my final score prediction will be 38-27, Clemson.
38-27. That sounds very reasonable. I did not see your national championship prediction, your Final Four, your playoff, your Power Five champions. What did you line up there preseason?
My preseason playoff picture looks like Clemson, Alabama, which I still believe Alabama's going to get there, but I do say that there's at least two other teams in the SEC who might get there ahead of them, and that's Georgia or maybe LSU. But anyway, I'm sticking with Alabama. So Clemson, Alabama, Oklahoma, obviously Texas could get in there too. I unfortunately for you and the rest of the Big Ten fans out there, I believe they're going to get left out again, and that maybe it's just because the East and the Big Ten is so tough. But nonetheless, I believe you're going to have maybe a 1 or 2 loss team, and maybe they don't win the Big Ten championship, or the Big Ten champion has 2 losses or something. And then my dark horse before the season was Oregon to make it, and after the game this past week, their chances of making the playoffs have certainly dwindled because the rest of their schedule is not very good. It's really going to depend on how good Washington and Washington State are, and of course Stanford. So we'll see how their strength of schedule plays out for the rest of the year. But as far as non-conference, I don't think they play anybody any good for the rest of the year.
Nope.
So, but an 11-1 Pac-12 champion Oregon, if they somehow have some big time, blowout wins over some of these other pretty good teams in the Pac-12, I think they will be in the conversation. So it's not completely out of the picture, but their chances dropped by losing to Auburn.
So, folks, we've got a lot of nice comments in the comment section as well, complimenting the discussion here. We appreciate the support. If you're locked in here, but don't know a whole lot about Pigskin Pete, you go right over on YouTube, Pigskin Pete, check out his channel, and certainly you will give him a subscribe button click. I guarantee it. Same thing here. If you're checking us out for the first time, don't subscribe. Check out the videos, see what we do. But our attempt is to bring you the best discussion, debate, and analysis you will find anywhere across the board, Power 5 football in particular. So we're going to turn it around very quickly here at 1 o'clock Eastern time, another live stream talking USC football, and I will take your calls after that. Pigskin Pete, we appreciate it more than anything this week. And specifically, as you said, on Thursday seems to be D-Day in regards to getting locked down and weathering this thing. All our thoughts and prayers to you and millions of others.
Yes, thank you. Is it bad that I don't want to lose power so I can watch college football this weekend?
No. You're talking to the wrong guy there.
Okay.
that is not a reach of an ask for me. I still remember a snowstorm here. I had just moved here with my family, only been here 6 months or so. National championship game of 2003. We had no power that morning. I was making all sorts of conditions in my mind. Where do I run to a hotel and grab the family and get out of Dodge? I would have to go for it wasn't like running down to the hotel down the street. It was like a 2-hour drive to get to, power, something like that. But fortunately, we got it back.
Yes, so, us hardcore college football fans will literally risk our life to watch a football game.
Pigskin Pete, it was great stuff, man. We appreciate you stopping by.
All right, thanks, guys. I had a great time.
All right, for everybody else, again, we're going to turn this thing around at 1 o'clock Eastern time, so a different live stream. But if you click on the channel page, you will not go wrong. And I know for a lot of you, it takes some time to get locked into the next live stream, so I appreciate your patience. But it's just I divide these because for the people that want to see a Clemson Texas A&M preview, they can see this after it posts to my channel. And for those of you that want to see USC Stanford, and we'll talk all college football. And after our guest is off the air in our next live stream window, I will take calls and we can talk up some college football. So I'll be back in about 5 minutes. USC Stanford, check that live stream out as well. And we will see you in just a few.